Welcome back to the swamp, my friends, and welcome if you are new. Today I'm going to be sharing some creepy and allegedly true paranormal horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. This has been one of the longest running series on this channel over the past, nearly 8 years at this point, and it's always been one of my favorites. I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of ghost stories or just stories with unexplainable endings, but I personally always love it. Being somebody who grew up in a haunted house myself, I can tell you, these stories just give me the heebie-jeebies. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It helps keep this show going on a daily basis, and I couldn't do it without you guys. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and get ready for these creepy and allegedly true paranormal horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. Tacoma Ghost Story by Mick. I'm a city boy from a city where the most significant wildlife you would find are probably squirrels. When I left the army and moved to Tacoma in an apartment near the community college, I was amazed at how many deer I saw weaving around the front yards and along the green belts around the town. One night, in the middle of summer, around 2 a.m., because that's where the bars close, I was walking home, slightly drunk but aware of my surroundings. That was a safe part of town back then, but there was no reason to take any chances. I saw 3 coyotes rush onto the sidewalk in front of me, and then they all stopped. All 3 of them just stared at me for a moment, and then looked behind them into the narrow tree line, acting kind of nervous. I've never seen more than 1 coyote at a time before, and certainly not in the suburbs. Being the big, arrogant drunk I am, I simply clapped my hands loudly a few times and quickly said, "Go on, get out of here." They did not run back into the tree line away from me. They trotted towards me initially, then crossed the street to avoid me, then sprinted past me as fast as they could. So now, I'm kind of wondering, what is with the narrow stretch of trees? What scared the coyotes away so quickly that they just ran past me in the street? I was a bit more curious than spooked, so when I got near the spot that they ran away from, I turned on my phone flashlight and started poking around. That's when I saw, or at least I thought I saw, a kid wearing a parka and boots running around, waving a stick around in each hand. In the middle of the night, in the middle of summer, all alone. It was like a kid around preschool age just frolicking around carefree. The kid very briefly glanced at me and then effortlessly disappeared into some blackberry bushes, which is no easy feat for a grown man with a machete, let alone a kid. I've never felt so weird in my life. I know I was slightly drunk and no one will believe me, but I called the police non-emergency number anyway. I reported that 3 coyotes were acting weird to let animal control know. And then I lost my nerve before mentioning the ghostly child running around. My eyes had barely left the place from where that demon kid thing had disappeared from, but I watched him disappear right in front of my eyes. I don't really know how to explain this experience other than it had to have been some sort of ghost. I Am No Longer a Skeptic by Anonymous. I would like to start by saying that while I am interested in the paranormal, I tend to be skeptical and prefer to think things out rationally before dismissing every little thing as a ghost or the like. This experience, however, has no logical explanation I can think of. I am new here, and as well, I apologize in advance if I'm not doing this correctly. So, let's get into this. I was 17 and it was mid-October, nearing Halloween. My family had gone to a small, rural town to meet up with some good friends. We were going to get dinner and catch up for old time's sake, as my siblings and I had grown up with the children of the other families. After dinner, the parents stayed at the bar drinking, and those of us who were not of legal drinking age were starting to get a little bored. That is when one of my friends brought up the local cemetery. Apparently there is a cemetery in this town that is said to be haunted. I'm pretty positive that some ghost hunter paranormal type show did an episode about it or something, but the legends are said to have been around since before that. The story goes that a group of teenage boys were wandering into the graveyard one Halloween night with the intention of causing trouble and maybe stirring up some spooky ghost action in celebration of Halloween. After messing around for a while with no unexplained phenomena, they decided to sit in on top of the mausoleum, which is basically just a big tomb built up around a coffin instead of burying it in the ground. They were about to call it quits and head home when suddenly, unseen hands seemed to push one of the boys off the top of the tomb and into the ground. All the boys were obviously scared and hightailed it out of there, all of them feeling an eerie, ominous energy following them around for weeks after the incident. There have also been numerous reports of orbs, headstones inexplicably moving or disappearing altogether, ghostly apparitions, inscriptions being changed, flashes of light, strange noises, the whole works. I, of course, was more than excited to check it out. We arrived at the cemetery well after dark, and one of my girlfriends, we will call her Emma, and I were the only two brave ones enough to go in. We hopped right out of the car, careful to be as inconspicuous as we could since we did not want the police showing up and ruining our ghost hunting experience. We headed toward the entrance. It was chilly and a bit windy, as autumn in Wisconsin tends to be. We gripped each other's hands and started down the gravel path. As soon as we passed the fence that surrounded the plot of land, everything seemed to get very still and very quiet. We could not even hear the wind anymore, which was strange as it had been breezy as we got out of the car. It was so silent that even whispering and our steps in the gravel seemed, pun absolutely not intended, loud enough to wake the dead. Though there were no lights in or near the cemetery, there was enough moonlight filtering through the clouds to allow us to see well. We soon realized we had no idea where the fabled haunted mausoleum was, but kept walking anyway. We made a random left turn, and lo and behold, there it was, about 30 yards or so in front of us. Surprisingly, we had great luck, right? I don't think so. As we approached, I began to feel almost an electric sort of energy in my fingers and hands, but I wrote this off as just nerves or something due to breaking the law. We reached the tomb, and this thing is absolutely huge. It was easily twice my height, at the very least, and made of weathered gray stone with moss and lichen growing sparsely on it. We stare at it for a moment, and Emma whispers, "You should touch it." Being the big bad ghost hunter I am, I oblige. There is really nothing remarkable about the cool roughness of the stone, so I decide to take it a step further and hop up to sit up on the lip of the curved top of the thing. Again, nothing happens, so I jokingly whisper shout, "If there's anyone here, any spirits or anything, come on out." After listening in silence for a second or two, I think, F it, and make my way to the very top where the kid is rumored to have been pushed off by ghostly hands. I have Emma snap a photo or two of me before climbing back down. Slightly disappointed by the lack of spooky encounters, we agree to head out and are about to do just that when we see a pair of headlights slowly creeping down the road that borders one side of the graveyard. We immediately assume someone noticed us and called the cops, so we crouch down behind some bushes with the mausoleum directly to our left. Both of us are completely silent except for our breathing as we watch the vehicle slowly make its way down the street. I am watching its tail lights turn the corner when I hear a low, creepy, menacing laugh coming from right behind me. It sounded so strange, like it was a few feet away but also right in my ear at the same time. I'm freaked out, and I'm about to chalk it up to adrenaline-induced hallucination, when Emma, who is standing to my left, whispers, "Hey, did you hear that?" My blood ran cold, as I slowly nod a silent, "Yes, I did." I cautiously turn my head to one direction, and try to see if I can hear it. I kid you not. I didn't hear anything, but what I did see was a dark figure stand up from behind one of the headstones not 10 feet away from us. I scream bloody murder and somehow end up on the ground as the next thing I know, Emma is pulling at my arm shouting, "We have to run! We need to get out of here, come on!" I let her pull me to my feet and lead me blindly by the hand. We are full out sprinting, tripping over gravestones and plants and who knows what else in the dark. We cannot even find the exit in our panic. We finally reach a gap in the fence and I can feel the tears streaming down my face as I run for my life down the middle of the road, not even paying attention to the oncoming headlights until I nearly run into them. Luckily, it was the car containing the rest of our friends, and we ripped the door open and throw ourselves inside screaming, "Go, go, please just drive," before we even bothered to sit in an actual seat or shut the door. I cannot for the life of me remember who was driving, but I think our panic and terror shook them enough that they did exactly what we asked of them and sped away back to the bar. They kept asking us what happened and if we were okay, but we would not calm down enough to answer them until we were back inside the bar and sat down. Still shaking and out of breath, we recounted our story to all of them, drunk parents included. I think a lot of them were skeptical, and honestly, I would have been too if I had not experienced it myself. In the weeks that followed, I felt the same eerie energy the boys in the legend describe hanging over my head. Personally, I attribute it more to paranoia after being scared out of my mind by something I could not actually see, but it made me feel uneasy nonetheless. It has been a few years since this happened, and I still cannot think of a single, logical explanation for what actually happened that night. While I have no idea how credible anyone else's reported experiences on this show are, I know we were without a doubt the only people in that graveyard, or even on the streets for that matter, and we would have heard someone trying to sneak up on us. The sound of that laugh was so unnatural. I cannot get it out of my head. Even now, I have never been more scared than I was that night, and I now know what people mean when they talk about not being able to fully believe in the paranormal until you have experienced it firsthand. Anyway, I just thought I would share this experience with you. I hope you enjoyed it. I Tried to Ghost Hunt by Anonymous. In 2009, I was interested in the paranormal, since I had many paranormal experiences growing up. I found a website that held ghost tours at the old Southwestern General Hospital. I was excited and ready to go on a ghost hunt. The group that held the ghost tour was named Ghost, or Ghost Hunters of South Texas. The group was professional, and they used many of the items that paranormal researchers used at the time. Before the tour, they showed us proof that they have captured in previous investigations while investigating the property. EVPs included a little boy saying, "Play with me, please," and a woman with a southern accent responding to questions. The woman is said to be in an old-time dress, and sometimes old-time nurse attire. After the tour, the group said they were having openings for new members, and the new members would be tested and would be considered in maybe being part of the new team. I was quick to join and try out. I made the team. The team would have private group ghost hunts, so we would have the building to ourselves. The third floor was used as a hospice type of area. The building has 4 floors. The first, second, and fourth floor were left abandoned, and they looked like a scene out of a horror movie. Hospital beds lay in rooms dusty and unused. Many had dates from 1995 and before. I even found a death log that had many names and dates. The most active areas were the 4th and 2nd floor. The 4th floor had a baby nursery, and many rooms that were once used for families that would be welcoming new babies. One EVP that was caught in that area was one of crying babies. At the time the EVP was caught, there were no babies in the building, and it was after midnight sometime when it was caught. Also on the 4th floor, there was a long hallway with empty patient rooms. In that hallway, shadows were always seen running or moving. The 2nd floor was an old area. Also, many shadow figures were seen in this area. When doing research on the deaths in the building, I came up with what looked like to be a nurse who was crushed to death when a malfunction with the elevator happened years ago. During the time I was a part of this group, we investigated this building tons of times. I might even care to say maybe over 100. I also led ghost tours in the building with other members. I witnessed shadows, disembodied voices, screams, and one time heard a female humming a song only to find the room empty and dark. I've seen videos of doors opening on their own with no wind or people in the building. Also, the 3rd floor had employees that would see things and hear things very often. Patients also complained of a kid running in their room or a man standing over their bed just looking at them, only to disappear. Over the years, I gained experience and loved what I did. As a group, we investigated many places such as schools, homes, and cemeteries in El Paso. We also got to investigate the old Asarco smelter before it was demolished several years later. I got to ghost hunt with people from Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International. I met many celebrities and the group had them take their own personal ghost tours. It was fun and I grew a thick skin for fearing anything that goes bump in the dark. One of my favorite places to investigate was Southwestern General Hospital. I never believed in being followed home. One night after investigating, I was at my apartment eating on my couch and watching TV. I had my hallway light on near the front door that was visible from where I was sitting. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow of a person on the wall near the door. I turned and saw the shadow in full form. It was about 6 foot tall and completely black. Then, not even a second later, the shadow moved as if it was running down my hallway to my bedroom. I froze in horror, thinking somebody was in my apartment. I got up and walked to my bedroom. Nobody was there. I searched the whole house up and down, and then I thought to myself, maybe I'm just going crazy. I soon went to bed a few minutes later. It was probably about 3:20 a.m. when I felt my bed shaking. I woke up to my sheets being pulled off me very slowly and deliberately. I tried to move, but I just could not. My sheets slid very slowly off me towards the floor. I could not move, and I started to hear growling in my right ear. From the corner of my eye, I could see something moving near my head on the right of me. It was on my pillow. I could only see it from the peripheral vision that it had hair. It was hairy and brown. If I could compare it to something, I would say Chewbacca from Star Wars type hair. It was moving, very slowly, but obviously very deliberately. It was growling as well. My eyes started to water up with tears. I tried to move my arm, but I just couldn't. I could only move my fingers. The blanket was still being pulled off me little by little until it hit the floor and I was no longer covered by my sheet. I felt the hairy thing moving right next to me, and the growling grew louder. Then suddenly, I was able to sit up and I turned and looked to see what was there next to me. The hairy thing was gone, but I could see the imprint of where it had sat right next to me just a moment ago. It was the size of a full-grown cat. Then I looked around the room to gather my sanity. I don't own a cat. My sheet was on the floor, and my eyes were still watery. I asked myself, maybe it was just sleep paralysis. I found it hard to sleep that night, since I lived alone in that apartment. The next day I had a girl over to my apartment. I was seeing her from school. I was playing PlayStation and she asked if she could take a nap in my bed. I said of course. She went to my bed and fell asleep. Around 20 minutes later, she suddenly came back to my living room in tears. She said, I have to leave now. I asked her what was happening and what was wrong. What she said shocked me. She said that something shook the bed and woke her up. She could not move, and then something was growling and started getting close to her ear. Then the bed went down as if somebody lied down next to her. She tried to scream for me and could not. Then she felt as if somebody was breathing on her neck as the growling grew louder. She said it lasted about 2 minutes, and then she was finally able to move. Once she was able to move, she ran to me in the living room. After she explained this, I grabbed her stuff and helped her leave. I did not tell her what happened to me the night before, but I had that same exact experience, and what happened to her was enough proof that something was not right. I could not explain what was happening. First thing that came to mind, that something probably followed me home from the hospital. After a few days, all the activity suddenly stopped. Only when I would go in on investigations, I would see shadows in my apartment, and then they would just go away. I loved what I did, and the only time I feared the paranormal was this moment. I no longer ghost hunt, and the group no longer gets together. Southwest General Hospital was purchased and is now remodeled and is in use. I can only imagine what the employees of the LTAC go through by being in that building. Every now and then I drive down Cotton and past the building. I miss the days of being part of Ghost El Paso. If you are ever in El Paso after stopping by at Chico's Tacos, be sure to pass by the old building by the Star on the Mountain, formerly known as Southwest General Hospital. Hey Swamp Dweller, my name is Michael B, and I live in the oldest village in Saskatchewan, before it was Saskatchewan, or before Canada was even a country. We live in the largest delta in Canada, and the second largest in the world. Something that old is obviously going to be haunted, and there's going to be lots of stories about creatures of the night. There are stories of witches, skinwalkers, wetigos, which are basically wendigos. There's been sightings of demons, a man in a trench coat with goat legs, and even the devil himself. For now, I want to talk about a story of a haunted house I lived in. It was used for wake ceremonies before we had halls to host them, and right behind the house was the graveyard. I'll start from the first happening. First, let me tell you about the layout of the front and back doors. Let's say you're standing on the street. You have the front door facing the street, obviously, and stairs leading up to it, with the big bay window next to the front door. The back door is on the side of the house facing the street as well, so you can see in both doors from the street. One day, I was home alone doing chores, and when it was time to do my laundry, I had to go downstairs into the basement to do it. The basement was scary by itself, even if it wasn't haunted because of how old it looked. Whenever I did my laundry, I would always feel like I was being chased up the stairs by something. It honestly felt like there was a face right at the back of my neck the entire time, screaming at me, breathing down my neck. On this day, my brother Jay was coming over to visit since I was home alone. I happened to be coming up from the basement, which pops up right at the back door. So, he saw me walking past the door into the living room. When he saw me walk past the storm door, he said he saw someone walking right behind me. When he gets into the house, he asks me who else is here, and I tell him no one. I've been home alone since this morning. He then tells me that he saw someone right behind me, following me from the basement. It gets worse throughout the months, but I'm oblivious to what's happening because I didn't believe in this stuff at the time. The second happening, I get home from drinking at about 4 a.m. I head into my room to sleep, and as I'm about to fall asleep, I swear I hear what sounds like hooves walking on my ceiling, or maybe even in the attic. It sounded bipedal for sure, heavy, and it stopped right above me. The last thing that happened before I refused to stay in that house was the worst thing. I was coming home after staying at my cousin's house for a couple of days, and seeing that my house was well lit. I assumed someone was home, so I started jogging because it was dark, and mosquitoes like to bite. Remember when I told you there was a big bay window by the front door? Well, the curtains were open, and as I ran up the stairs, I looked inside and saw a black mass sitting on my couch looking out to me. I didn't think anything of it. I thought someone was home. There was a split second from when I see that thing on the couch to when I walked in the house. I walk in and there was no one there whatsoever. I was absolutely creeped out. I started calling out to my mom and walked around the entire house. Nothing. No one was home. I stood in my living room for a second, and that's when it hit me. Who the hell was on my couch? That's when I hear someone walking up the stairs and dread washed over me. I got the hell out of that house and moved out a month later due to unrelated things. These events happened during my second year at university. It was September. The school year was about to start, and I had moved into a high-rise apartment with 3 other girls, Brittany, Morgan, and Natalie. It didn't take long for some sketchy things to start happening. After 2 weeks of living in the apartment, Morgan asked me if I was rolling a ball around at night. I told her it wasn't me, and that she must have been hearing things. We dropped the subject, but that night I started hearing knocking in the vent above my bed. The vent hung below the ceiling, and the opening was perfectly in line where my head would be when I was sleeping. The knocking sound was annoying, and it would only happen at odd hours of the night. I always thought it was probably the sound from the air conditioning turning on, but the knocking sounded strange, almost human and rhythmic, like someone trying to get my attention. Still, I didn't think too much of it and didn't think anything was going on. It was just an odd noise that I could live with, so I told myself. About a week later, I woke up to hear what sounded like a marble rolling on the tile floor above me. It was a distinct sound, and I finally believed Morgan. But I knew there had to be a logical explanation. There were college boys living in the apartment above us, and I figured they were probably messing around. By November, Natalie, Morgan, and I had been hearing the noises every night. but Brittany claimed she had never heard them. One day, we were making small talk with the building manager, and I mentioned the noises. She said the people who lived in our apartment before heard rolling and knocking sounds as well. She claimed she had electricians come in to fix noises, but I guess it never worked. At this point, we all thought it was funny. We didn't believe in ghosts. Well, I didn't until that night. As we were walking into our apartment, my back was to the living room, and Morgan and Natalie were facing me, so they had a full view of the living room. I jokingly said to them, "Well, it looks like the apartment is haunted." Natalie looked at me, laughed, and said, "Ghosts aren't real." As soon as the last word came out of her mouth, I heard the most gut-wrenching, deafening noise I had ever heard up until that point. Crashing, shattering, and scratching noises erupted from behind me. My heart raced and I saw true terror on Natalie and Morgan's face. Their high-pitched screams pierced my ears and, on instinct, I ran. I didn't even look back one time. I just screamed and ran straight out of the apartment with Natalie and Morgan close behind. We didn't stop until we were one floor away from the lobby, and at that point, we were in tears. It may have been an overreaction, but I thought a maniac had broken into our apartment. Natalie explained that after she had spoken, everything in our apartment crashed onto the floor. She didn't see anyone. All she saw was all of our stuff just flying off. The shelves, the counters. After a while, we calmed down and went back upstairs. Inside of our apartment, all of our pictures, appliances, lights, and decorations were on the ground. Our light fixtures were unscrewed and were hanging by the wires. Some of the cabinet drawers had been left open, and our Christmas lights were twisted around the sofa. We really did try to rationalize what had happened, but we just could not figure it out. We lived in Canada, so there was no earthquake, tremor, or tornado. Brittany had been in the apartment the entire time. When we knocked on the door, she answered and said she had never heard anything happen. I found that very hard to believe. Throughout the year, odd occurrences kept happening. The noises continued. Our lights would turn on and off. Doors would open and close, and sometimes at night we would hear someone mumbling in the hallway. My tolerance level for annoying things got low as exam season approached, so I stopped caring about what was happening. The next year, Natalie, Morgan, and I moved into a different apartment within the same building. We didn't experience anything weird after moving out. I can't help but think that Brittany was to blame for some of this. It's hard to explain, but she was a dark person. I wouldn't put it past her to have messed with us for fun. To this day, I still can't decide if it was something paranormal, Brittany messing with us, or just an odd coincidence. Regardless, it was one of the weirdest and scariest experiences of my life. I just hope I never live in a haunted apartment or haunted house ever again. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true paranormal horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. If you enjoyed these stories and would like to support The Swamp, please be sure to hit that like button as it helps us out a ton. The more likes this episode gets, the more YouTube promotes it in its algorithm, which helps us reach more people, which helps grow The Swamp. If you're new, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new episode, as I upload them multiple times a week in all things natural and supernatural. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that truly help keep this show going on a daily basis. I would love to know in the comments down below what story was your favorite. It always helps me pick better stories, and I love seeing your reviews. If you have any spooky little ghost stories you'd like to share in the comments, definitely throw them down. I'll pin the coolest one at the top. I love seeing your stories, and I'll see you all soon with another creepy episode.